Very good evening to all of you, respected Dr. Sahasabuddhiji, Chairman AICT, Dr. Furkan Kamar, Dr. Chaturvedi, Dr. Rajan Saxena, distinguished participants and the delegates. First of all, I thank Mr. Amit Agnihotri for inviting me today for this session. Dear all, allow me to begin by saying something that all of you are aware of. Things don't get better by chance, but through a conscious push towards change. It is this change that the draft National Education Policy 2019 has proposed to bring about in the Indian education system. Let us look at some of its aspects and see how it can transform institutions, especially those of management education. So my brief speech would be basically focused on will this be a game changer for management education in India? Well, if I look back and in the backdrop of the challenges which have been enumerated by Dr. Chaturvedi, by Dr. Rajan Saxena, and many of the earlier speakers in the previous session, that the basic challenge before the management education today is that does this education lead to connect, nurture, and grow? Or is it simply an institution which provides a way for the dissemination of knowledge without having any clear-cut objective? For what? For what reason? Is it related to for the development of the nation, for the national cause? My answer to this question is no. Let us look at some of its aspects and see how it can transform management education. The first aspect, I think, is the research. There are thousands of students enrolled in PhD programs in numerous Indian universities and institutions. And yet, this academic research does not often deliver concomitant gains for industry. Why? Because a lack of clear direction about its planning and implementation often defeats the research purpose. As such, research, instead of being a positive change driver for the business ecosystem in our country, is restricted to being the vehicle for students to earn their doctorate's degree. The National Education Policy, therefore, aims to change this by placing a renewed focus and importance on the quality of research. It proposes the creation of National Research Foundation, NRF, which will focus on funding research within the education system. And this will support subjects like social sciences that are integral to management courses. Doing so will also bring greater cohesion in multidisciplinary researches undertaken by learners enrolled in Indian B schools. I would like to draw your attention to the basic challenge for lack of research mobilization in the management institutes and the B school is the problem of having resource constraints. How to mobilize additional financial resources without being dependent on the traditional source of funding of the educational expenditure in the B schools, to my mind, is a great challenge. Will this policy of creation of National Research Foundation will address to this challenge of the B school? The time will tell you the answer. Right now, I don't have any answer. However, doing so will also bring greater cohesion in the thinking, in the churning of the ideas through debate and discussions among the scholars. The NRF, I appreciate, will also catalyze educational institutions to facilitate higher quality research. Will that? Yes. Because today in our country, people have realized that in order to create knowledge disseminations, we need to have the knowledge creation. And therefore, knowledge creation, we need more resource funding. And it will do so through institutionalized mentoring mechanisms with the help of experts from India's premier institutions. This can initiate an exchange of ideas across universities and institutions, which potentially lead to a complete transformation of the research ecosystem in our country. Management institutes, which offer heavily research-based courses, stand to benefit the most from this change, from this policy. To better prepare students for a research degree, the National Education Policy proposes to introduce a strong research component at the master's and doctorate levels. This will go a long way in improving the quality of research in the country produces today. I would like to say here that if this policy addresses the basic problem of educational expenditure, and that is financing of education, financing of higher education. And I probably think if the government thinks seriously about various mechanisms and the modality as to how the financing of higher education can be facilitated with the better institutional mechanism, and by mobilizing more additional resources without being dependent on traditional budget, then I think this idea of having NRF will definitely yield results so far as the research development activities by the B schools are concerned. The second most important ingredient, and I think that should be a game changer for management education once we are debating and discussing about the impact of national education policy on management education, and that is technology. Technological disruption has taken the world by storm. However, the Indian education system has not optimally utilized these new age tools to its benefit. The slow pace of learning and low quality education prevalent in the country are a result of this technological gap. There has been a support from the government to promote better use of technology in education. The new education policy, therefore, has proposed to explore artificial intelligence and virtual reality to make quality education accessible in the remotest areas across India. This can ease teaching, learning, and evaluation processes and democratize education, particularly benefiting management institutes and training the next generation of business leaders. It is also important to note, to my mind, that when the National Repository of Educational Data proposed by National Education Policy comes into effect, the problems of managing heavy data will be reduced drastically. It can even become a topic of study, research for B schools. I would like to say here that when I said earlier, connect, nurture, and grow, it can be achieved only by technology. Today, the B schools are thinking and realizing the importance of new technology-oriented courses such as artificial intelligence and machine learning and their impact on the decision-making process, and also as to how it can create future leaders from the B schools. The third important aspect, which I think is also very important when we talk about the impact aspect of governance, and that is institutional governance. As there is no dearth of B school across the country, there arises a strong need for controlling their accountability. As an answer to this question, the National Education Policy is aiming to address the quality concerns across different institutions by putting in place a common governance system in the form of new Higher Education Commission. New Higher Education Commission can bring curricular, administrative, and financial elements on a common platform and initiate the required changes. This will ensure that the quality of learning and accountability in B schools across India matches a common standard. Well, my comment on this is this, that governance, so far as a B school is concerned, it does not imply governance in that bureaucratic control. Governance implies in terms of as to how the delegation can percolate down to the level where the decisions are taken, from board to the classroom, from classroom to the corporate sector or to the ecosystem. And therefore, this policy is trying to build up a relationship of governing bodies with those of the decision makers and the implementers and the change makers. And I think that this policy will definitely achieve this objective of institutional governance. The last important point which I would like to touch upon is the autonomy. In addition to its focus on driving excellence, the national education policy leaves room for autonomy. How is it that the B schools can enjoy autonomy and can grow and achieve its targets in a very competitive environment? Well, I think the answer to this question is that it all depends upon how innovative, how much innovative are these B schools today in terms of course curriculum or delivery or methodology or in terms of connecting with the industries and the outside world. Leading B schools can thus gain faster accreditation by various international agencies like AACSB or EQUIS, and thus kick-starting a cycle of internationalization. There are many things that which have not been touched by this national education policy so far as the management education is concerned. And I do agree with my earlier speaker, Dr. Chaturvedi, when he says that there are only 2-3 pages which have been mentioned in this draft policy. But these 3 pages are very important so far as B schools are concerned, because these 3 or 4 pages have highlighted very important aspects of the B school, and that is, what is the objective of having management education today in our country? In the end, I would like to say that even though we have a rough idea about how the future looks, we can't say much about what exactly holds. The education policy can facilitate us in moving towards this tech-enabled future in a guided manner. However, at the end of the day, it is on us, learners, educators, and B schools alike, to leverage it effectively and thrive forward. We have to learn new trends and unlearn the ideologies that have become obsolete. We need to actively keep this cycle of change rolling. Thank you so much.